Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's Masterclass series, Part 2, Model Risk Industrialization. We are extremely pleased to have as our speaker today, ModelOps Chief Technology Officer Jim Olson. And with that, I'd now like to hand it over to Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, well, welcome today, everyone, to this next edition of the Masterclass series. And today we will be specifically looking at model risk industrialization, which we gave you a brief overview of last week. But unlike last week, this will be a hands-on demonstration where we're actually going to go through and we're actually going to show how you can customize a standardized test for your environment, incorporating either your tests or open source solutions. In this case, we're going to introduce you to Great Expectations and what we've done there with it. And the process I went through to add it into our system is a standard, basically standard test that you can run. So you can use the same kind of techniques we're doing today to incorporate anything you find out there that's an open source you like or ones you have already developed internally. So we're going to be doing that. But I do want to remind you that this is a weekly event. So next Thursday, we'll be looking at the model visibility across the enterprise, where we actually look at the hands-on demonstration again of how you can actually develop dashboards that are custom to your business and report those results through the ModelOps Center to actually understand both the value your models are bringing in and the current status of your services and the costs of the business when those things are down, things like that. And then the follow-on week, April 7th, we'll actually look at how we can actually deploy models, different methodology deployments, including things such as deployments to a live running engine, but it can also be things like deployments to Artifactory or edge case scenarios or all kinds of other doing a demonstration there as well. So definitely encourage you to join in on those additional sessions coming up as well. So today, though, our concentration is specifically around model risk industrialization. A lot of people either have a model risk department they're already currently in flight doing, or they're developing one. They recognize the risks that models can bring to the business, and that there's regulations around these and stuff, and you have to show the due diligence that you're doing. And as we all know, it can be a big challenge to really staff up a team, scale them up, get the appropriate resources. So what we're going to be looking at today is ways where we can automate part of those processes and remove a lot of the kind of the drudgery part out of it and the back and forth between first and second line, as well as just being able to run some tests up front so we can catch errors before we have somebody have to manually look at those and get that those results back to the actual developer. So we're going to be doing that. Specifically, what we're going to be doing is this simple model lifecycle diagram, which will dive into more in the hands-on portion, where what we're going to do is, first verify the completeness of the submission. For instance, we can't really do a lot of analysis on a model if we don't have baseline data. So did they give us that? Did they describe the schema so we know what the score and label columns are? All of those kinds of things. And then we're going to specifically show how we expanded one of ModelOps' core solutions to include examining the data sets for data quality issues using an open source library. So we're going to show you how we added that, as well as, running Great Expectations test suites on there as well, and doing that in automated fashion so that all the information gets to the model risk validator when they actually receive the model. And we're also going to run some standard statistical analysis using black box techniques on that. So we're going to do that hands-on as the approach on that. So when we're actually talking about these kind of standardized tests we have, a lot of solutions you'll see where they have something, it's out of the box, it's in there, and you use it, but you can't really modify it. It may or may not really fit what you need to do. And also you have to then wait if a new package comes out, such as a new bias detection or something like that, for it to become available. Well, one big differentiator we've put in place, and is in our version 3.0 product that was just released last week and we will be using today, is that basically you can write your own tests, whatever they are, in anything that one of our runtimes will run, like Python, R, C, Java, etc. To do that, we'll be using Python today because it's a very common language to use for data science techniques. And then basically we'll be actually specifying within the model definition what the baseline and sample data are for doing kind of some standard statistical analyses on that. And then all of that information will actually get sent to you as part of the job to actually go execute that. So in your code, you can actually read anything about, well, what is the scoring column? Here's the data, and we'll examine what that code looks like today. And then we'll actually basically, you can output any dictionary with a bunch of values, and they will be returned into JSON and associated with the model test results. So you can actually then analyze those, as we'll show in the next step, where we can actually take stuff into account. So you can basically create any kind of a test you want on that kind of things, and actually have us automate that and run it for you and associate it with your model information. There we go. And then more importantly, when your test is complete, we provide a very robust way for actually providing the analysis of those tests rather than either just reporting the values, which absolutely we do, and we will be showing that. You can actually use a decision table to actually look at those values and set parameters based on multiple conditions. So basically, in today's example, what we're going to be actually looking at here is we're actually going to be running where if it's a high-risk model, so we're taking some of the metadata about the information from the model. So you'll see the model risk column there. So if it's high, we're basically saying for data quality issues, we can't have more than one. We're only allowing one P1 issue. Whereas if it's a low-risk model, we can have up to 3. And likewise, same with priority 2 issues and priority 3. Now, we can also take into account, for instance, we're just doing a very simple example of the model risk today. But you could also take into account, for instance, the type of the model. So if it's a classifier model versus a regression model, we can say, well, yeah, obviously, certain statistics you run on both, and you don't want to try to hold a regression model to a classification test. It's not going to work. So, we can exclude those tests in this analysis for different kinds of models, et cetera, on that. And this is expandable infinitely. So basically, even if you have custom metadata on a model that's specific to your company, you can turn around and create one of these decision tables and associate it with that standardized test. And you will be able to actually then change the criteria based on that. So, maybe it's the destination within the company or the business unit group or any of those kinds of things. So it really ends up being a powerful way to do that. And we'll be demonstrating how that works using that. And then finally, actually when we get these results out, it's nice to have the results, review them in our system and all that, but realistically, when you're creating a model review document report that goes back, you want a consistent template that you can do. So we're going to show how you can set up those templates and actually feed the data from even your custom result back into a Microsoft Word document, for example, and have our document service actually populate that for you. And in this case, we're going to attach it to a Jira ticket and do that. So you'll actually can keep those documents associated with that standardized test for different situations and deal with that. So it's a very flexible and powerful methodology to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our screen share here on that. And give me 1 second. And we're going to get hands-on here and actually do that. So, we're going to be using the ModelOps Center 3.0 today to do all of this work. But as I said, one of the tools I found relatively recently that I wanted to incorporate into our product was Great Expectations. Kind of a cool test suite for actually developing what I would call unit tests for your basically your data sets. I'm going to give you a simple example of that today, how to set that up. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, though, because this is an open source product that you can feel free to use. I want to give you an idea of the kind of things you can actually do with it. And now that's incorporated ahead and actually just initialize this, and you'll see you can actually it guides you through all of this. It'll actually set up the product, your project. So you go within your model directory, and you'll end up with a Great Expectations file folder underneath this. And then once you actually init it, the next step is to actually register your data sources, which it actually recognizes a whole bunch of those. So we're going to go ahead and actually do that. And then we're just going to, data source new. That would be better. Let me type correctly. and basically we'll just give it our folder. It could be SQL files, etc., but we're just going to show it with the files. We're going to show the pandas, and then we have a local folder just data. And then you'll see it actually goes ahead and runs and actually gives us the ability to register these data sources. And then it's kind of neat, and it actually walks you through using a Jupyter notebook where you can actually go and run each step, filling out what you want as you go along. So you can rename the data source, then you can actually create it, and it'll actually run it. And then you can test out the configuration, make sure it's good, and then actually finally save that configuration. So now that configuration is actually saved within our system. And now we can go ahead and actually register. Some fun parts of this is it'll actually set up a standard kind of suite of tests for you based on your data. So it's a very quick way of doing that. So we're going to go ahead and show you just how to actually define a new suite. And then we're going to move on from that and use one that I've already predefined. But you can actually just give it the new, and it'll actually go, and you can say automatically set that up with a profiler. And then you pick one of your data source files. So we're going to grab some yellow taxi data and actually name that, and then go ahead and actually proceed. It will go in and actually register that in there. And once again, it gives us a Jupyter notebook where we can go in and basically look at that sample, and we go ahead and actually then create the suite. So we can we're going to go ahead and initialize that real quick to bring in there. It's going to analyze the data, and it's going to look at the columns, and they basically by default ignore most of the columns. So what you do is you just comment out quickly the ones you actually are interested in. So it seems kind of backwards to me, but that's how it does it. So the ones that you actually want to be profiled, you comment out on that. Actually, I don't care about payment type. We'll go ahead and grab that. Fare amount, though, extra, we don't care about MTA tax. Tip amount, we're going to predict tips, so we're going to keep that, and we'll keep the total and get rid of that. So now all the commented out ones are the ones we're actually going to deep on that kind of things. Oops, I missed one. There we go. And that. And let me get that total amount in there. There we go. So all the commented out is the ones we're going to keep. And then we just go ahead and run that. And finally, we run that profiler. And what we'll see is it actually goes through and then analyzes all the data for us automatically and kind of gives us suggested values. And then you can actually go and renew this later. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this, but I did want to get you the idea of how easy it is to actually get all of this set up to then actually be able to take advantage of those within our system. So it's a great way to get those unit tests in place on that. But what I really want to concentrate around is the ModelOps products. Close these out real quick and get back into this. Now, as I mentioned, I really like this test suite because it lets us actually look at some of the kind of the quality of the data. Is it within the means there, et cetera, like that. So let me make this a little bigger so you can follow along. So what I want to do is actually go ahead and write a new standardized test suite and register it with the ModelOps system. So, we have a series of different monitors you can use right out of the box that actually work with our system, and you can incorporate within your Python code. Now, we have a bunch of these pre-written, so you don't have to do anything to use standard drift or stability or those kinds of things. But let's say you want to make your own that not only calculates the stability, but in this case, we want to use an open source package called Y Data Quality as well as Great Expectations to actually run some additional items. So you'll see here that we can actually have an initialization where we can grab some information about the model. And that's the first step in there. Our system will automatically call whatever function you tag with that tag to actually go in before the standardized test is actually run. So that way you can capture some of that kind of information. And then you just register a function with us that returns a dictionary. And again, you tag it, so it doesn't even have to be named anything. We will then call that, and all you need to do is yield that dictionary. So you can see here where we're actually going to go through, and actually we have several different functions utilizing both our out-of-the-box models that we already have, as well as this new data quality one using an open source library. The whole idea of why I'm showing this to you is to show you how literally you can incorporate any test into our system that you want to write on that. And then you can see where we just concatenate these together. But then we're also going to get some of that metadata from the actual model itself that's stored in our system and put it in the test results so we can use it in those decision tables. So, we're going to get the model use category and the risk and things. And this could even include, for instance, any custom metadata that you put in there and you designed within your company. So you can see here where we have these out-of-the-box monitors you can just use. And we have a helper here that actually takes that schema that's associated with the model already and actually reads that in. So then, we're going to get that, and we can easily then evaluate it using, we're going to do regression metrics in this case, and then actually return those values back into our system. But what's really interesting is, basically this third-party open source package that does basically some data quality analysis and actually integrates with Great Expectations as well. We basically go ahead and actually can add this in. And I just had to write a little bit of Python code to go in there, exercise that. I wrote that all locally and then actually registered it with the ModelOps system. And again, I can just grab those results into a dictionary and return those, and they will be executed by our system. So, it's really powerful, and you can, as I said, we're using Python today, but you could use R or other languages as well and run them. And then they actually get registered within our system, just like any other model. So, I registered this one under the, let's see, one more page over here. I actually registered this one as the standardized MRI test is what I called this one. So you can see where this is in our system. And we actually have, for instance, there's our source code that we just wrote, the standard test.py. That's in there. So you can see that's registered with the system through Git in there, as well as that decision table I showed you earlier in the presentation. So we were able to put that together and incorporate model risk, et cetera, in there as well. And then we also have two different document files, exception report and a model review document that are standard doc files with just some special tags in them where basically we can read any data from ModelOps or from the model or from a model test result associated with the model and insert them into the document. So that way we'll actually be able to, grab the results of these and send them to people in a human readable form. And we'll be showing how that all works together here in a few minutes on that. So whatever you want to actually incorporate within that DMN, you can actually bring in there. So if we go back to our Camunda modeler here, we're going to use that for our BPMN editor today. And we've created a flow today that we're going to run through where basically we're going to start out by basically verifying the completeness of the model. This is the first check we like to do up front before when it comes off the first line, headed to the second line, because we want to make sure they specified the training data, some sample data that they did actually fill out a schema and et cetera on these. And you can just drag and drop these into place from our system and our library to actually be able to let you do that because they're parameterized. So you can check for whatever different items that you want, including specific file names or roles of files, et cetera, on that kind of things. And then we'll show you some examples of what those look like here when we actually import a new model and run it through this process. And then we're actually going to go ahead and actually that data quality test model, that standardized model we just created, you can see it has a specific ID. So we're going to grab the latest snapshot of that particular new model we registered in the system by just importing from Git, which will be the same procedure as we do for our test model. We're going to run through this. And then we're actually going to run those data quality analysis tests, including that new Python code we added on there and capture the results. And we're actually going to run through that DMN and actually examine them and either create an exception report using that exception report document we saw attached to the model, the test model, or we're going to actually fill out basically a review document, which you also saw attached to the test model. That's then going to go on to the second line, which will give them information back into our system, as well as the start of a good review document where we have a bunch of information. And today we're just going to show a simple example of that to give you a flavor of what can be done there on that. So these can, as a reminder, these can be uploaded directly from tools right into our system and updated and modified by yourself without any change required on our part, and you can register multiples of these. So we're going to use those. So really what we want to do is actually start to look at, what does it look like? Now we've registered the standardized test that we see is within our system. Well, now we're going to actually register a business model that we want to actually run through that process and actually be examined. So we're going to go ahead and actually import that model to begin with. So you can see we've created a model out here based on the taxi data that we've actually registered in GitHub. So it's just in standard GitHub. We're going to bring that into our system, and we'll see how we capture the information, as well as we have that grade expectations information associated with the model. So we're going to go ahead and add a new business model and just go to Git. And we're going to bring that right into our system, and we'll give it a name. Nothing spectacular. We'll just give it a simple description. And then we go ahead and actually import that model. So that's actually now cloning it down to our system. We're actually going to track it and get from then on out. We're going to analyze the model and figure out the different files that are actually associated with it, and kind of actually guess what their roles are, which we can go review on that and actually take a look at. So you can see where we brought those down. We can see where we've got the model source, but we've also got the comparator data and some sample data and the training data that's actually there, as well as the schema definitions. So when we actually look at these, this is where you can actually basically kind of actually specify what label columns are and what scoring columns are and the data types and et cetera, so that we can run those tests in a generic manner. So basically our tests don't have to be tied to a specific label column name. Your model specifies what the label is, and our test reads it from this metadata that's actually associated with the model and has that. And then you can actually edit that schema within our system as well to actually say like what's a protected class, et cetera, as well, once you've brought the model in on that. So we have all of that information. So, that way you can design your tests to read from that information to know what columns you should be analyzing, et cetera. I'll go ahead and bring up a window here real quick and get something cute, because it always happens fast. So again, the process we want to actually run through is now to run our custom test that we actually registered with the system. So we're going to go to that process that we actually have, and we're going to watch it run through here. So we're going to go ahead. It starts when we create a new version of the model, because that's what we want to do. Now I have a bunch of different options on here. So I'm going to add a tag so it goes to the right option here. And we're just going to go ahead and accept the defaults. Now we're going to go ahead and actually create a snapshot. Now when we do that, it's going to actually start the process. So you can see it actually ran through, it verified the model completeness. So we know the model is actually complete. We know it had the training data, and et cetera. If it didn't, we would have immediately created a Jira ticket back to the user telling them the exact missing assets that they need to do and to resubmit the model with that. So you're not wasting time bouncing back and forth saying, well, gee, I didn't get the training data, or, oh, well, there was an official sample data associated with this, or there's no schema definition, so I have no idea what the label column is for sure, or any of that kind of information. Now we can actually see over in the jobs page here where we're actually running those standardized tests now. So we're actually live running all of those items and pulling the information into the system. It's pulling the baseline data down and running that. It will run the grade expectations tests. It'll run some data quality analysis. It's going to run those stability items. It's doing all of that for us. And then all of these results will actually be associated back with the model and then we'll actually examine the results of those. So, there's a job abstraction. Now we're running this job on our local one, but let's say you want to write your own model in analysis in Spark because you had some huge data or something like that. We do support Spark as a runtime too, so you could register that Spark model with us as a standardized test and run it there as well, and still capture these results the same way and pull that information because we really abstract that information back on there. So we're going ahead and running that. It's completed over here. So we're going to go back to the model life cycles and take a look at where we are at. There we are. And you can see that it actually completed and it actually passed the test and went on to actually basically go in and have the document reviewed. So it did actually pass our quality tests on that. So if we look back at that model, we're actually going to be able to see that, it's like we call it the individual tests are going to be available for us. So we can see there was our actual run of the MRI tests. So we can view these within our system, and we'll see that all of the results were actually captured. So we can see where we had a priority 1 issue and a priority 2 issue, priority 3 issues, etc. We can also see our standard stability analysis that we did on the different features available for this different model. This all came from that one call inside our out-of-the-box models where you can incorporate these results into the system on there, so you can get the individual results on there, as well as we ran the standardized regression metrics on this model as well as chaos drift analysis as well. So, we wanted all these to be run as part of our standard tests. And you can also even see our custom information about running that data quality analysis and the grade expectations. So we can see the individual, items that came out as warnings from the grade expectations test, as well as actually all available to us. Now, this is within our system and available through there. So, it's nice to have this point of record, and it's always associated back to that version of the model, and we can actually track that. But what we really want to do is wake somebody up that this information is available. So we are going to go over to our standard Jira. Now, if you notice, our system actually had, welcome to the real world of what actually happens here sometimes in a live demo with that. Let me restart my Jira instance real quick. So my software works, but sometimes Jira does not on there. Let me jump over here real quick and just kick that container real fast, so you get to see that as well. But basically we do the integration with Jira where we can report this information in there, and apparently it was not happy, so we'll try to restart it there and see if it wakes back up. But we actually will populate that document with the information into the Jira system here on that, and attach it to the ticket where it can actually run and be present on that kind of information. Let me see if I've got an example of this already up here on that. If this will restart, it's trying to get going here. Let's see if we can get it waking back up. Come on. Come on, Jira. There we go. Let me see if that'll actually restart it up on there. And we'll get it going here. But basically the idea there is that then Jira actually provides us that information of what that looks like on there. So let me see if, okay, what we're going to do, give me just 1 second here on that. I do want to point out on the DMN tables while we're waiting for that to restart how you can actually bring those in and edit those. So you'll see here that, when you actually bring up any DMN, you can use a standard DMN editor to actually bring those files up on that. Bear with me 1 second while I get this other item restarted here. One second. I apologize for this, for my problems with Jira. But you can see where you can actually bring these in. So you can actually bring in another column and actually add the input. And so, for instance, we were showing basically the model risk as an example on there. So, you can actually edit this and actually change these to whatever you want them to be. So, this is how you would enter the model risk into the solution and actually get that information. So you can pull that information out on there and, add it to there, and you can give it any type that's actually a value in there. And then you would basically add, so for instance, we could say, and model risk is high. So, we just do that. So now it would only do, if the model risk were high, it would expect this value to be between, less than 90. But then we could add another column where basically we copy the rule and then add it, paste rule below. We could add another one where we say, well, you know what? For low risk models, we can actually instead do a risk of less than 80% on this kind of things. Likewise, we could say, if we're doing a different technique such as classification versus regression, we could take that into account. So it really gives you a great way. These decision tables really give you a great way of actually handling these kinds of files. I'm just going to look real quick here, 1 second, and see if I have an example of document already filled out, because it's not looking like Jira is going to restart on me. So I apologize for that. Jira is not liking my current situation on there. So I'm not sure what happened there, but you can see we can actually track that when we actually go look at the business model itself as well. So if we go back to the business model, we actually track where it is at this particular snapshot. We will see that there's an error, and it's going to actually tell us that there's the item where we're actually waiting for this on that kind of thing. So we can actually bring in the information about the items that are in there. But more importantly, I'll use this as a learning experience here, in that you can see where the system is actually reporting to us that the Jira system is unavailable, and we're keeping track of that. So we really do have all of the information about the model, and you can see that we actually have a ticket that's waiting to be created. So when the system come back, it would actually create that Jira ticket and actually provide that information to us. So it's a really kind of a great way of tracking all of the information about the model on that. So I'm going to quickly see if I've got a example documentation already filled out I can share with you on that. Bear with me 1 second here on that. Since Jira is not going to start on me on that, let me get the date modified. With a little luck, I do have one. So bear with me just 1 second, and I'm going to go ahead and shoot that over to myself, and then we can review what those actually look like on that. So bear with me 1 second here. Go ahead and send, and then 1 second here. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second here. Oop. Let me just 1 second. Let me grab that file, and we will resume the screen share. And open that document up. And okay, so I've grabbed that file. I'm going to go ahead and restart the screen share. Bear with me. And there we go. And we can see what actually gets populated out of that information. So we can see here, I downloaded that document that was generated. And basically the idea being that, we can actually grab the fields and the information, insert them right into the document, get different graphs, et cetera. And those all come from those test results. So we have the ability to do that. So I wanted to give you that idea of what's there. And again, I apologize for Jira being down. Our system would handle that. But, Jira doesn't want to restart on me. So with that, I know we're getting close on time. And I do want to actually be able to take some questions on here. So let me stop the screen share here and get to some of the questions. All right, here we go. All right, perfect. The first question I have is, many EPM, CPM vendors provide embedded models in their platform. How can we use ModelOps Center for these models? Well, sometimes we refer to those as vendor models. So, one of the advantages of actually doing black box style testing is that we don't actually need the model code. So we can actually register just a reference to the model. We can register even an empty model in our solution, et cetera. And then you can provide us references to both the baseline data. I mean, obviously the baseline data, they're going to provide that to you. Or if you're using the model yourself and training it in a specific way, then obviously you would have access to the baseline data as to how you did that along with your parameters that actually went into the model. And then likewise, you would run a sample test out using that model. And again, you could store those in something like S3, et cetera, on that, and provide us the references to those. And then because our out-of-the-box models and are in any models you create would actually run on those data sets, you would actually be able to do exactly what I showed you today, and actually run the analyses of those data sets, the data quality analysis, the grade expectations, the stability test. All of those only need the data, not the model code. So in those cases, that's how you would approach that and register that with the system. And then we would just have a shell of a model, in essence, that referenced that model you're using out of the box, the vendor model. And then you would actually, then all the metadata and stuff can still be associated at the test results and et cetera. And, you could store, if let's say it was a parameterized model that you tweak some parameters on or whatever, you could store those particular parameters that you're using in our system as the metadata too. So all of this is still absolutely possible with that. And in fact, we have done that with vendor models in specific. And then the next one is maybe I missed it. The test is for raw data. What about test of code and results of feature engineering? I'd have to look at the specifics on that one. I'm not 100% sure what you're asking on there. I mean, basically, you can provide any files to us and register with the system as an asset, and actually then, as I said, register custom code that actually analyzes those. So we're not really restricted in what we store and how we store it if we have access to that information. We are not, to be very clear, ModelOps is not a data science workbench development tool. It is very much for once you submit it to the risk engineering. So we'd expect a lot of the kind of like the analyses of that and et cetera to be documents that are likely associated with the submitted model, and then references to where the data itself is. But obviously we could include additional items there as well on that. And is it possible to aggregate model risk in ModelOps? There's a few different ways of aggregation, so I'm not sure specifically which approach you're talking about in there. But we do show, for instance, risk over time. We do show, we have the concept of dashboards, which we'll be looking at next time, where we can actually look at, daily changes in risks of the business, et cetera, on those kinds of things. We do also have the ability to have related models and reference models. So, for instance, you could have a reference model that has a known quantity, and you've got to basically show that its risk is similar or better than the reference model. It can also be an ensemble of models, is another form of aggregation where we can actually look at, like, there's 16 models in the actual solution, and what are the individual items within that. Don't know, you can automatically roll that up. I mean, it's absolutely something that could be done within a custom code if you want to truly aggregate the risks of the items, but likely you're going to be looking at each model within that overall risk pattern and being able to kind of give a summary of all of the pieces of that complete item that delivers the solution, as well as that. Another question here on how would you handle SageMaker models? Well, SageMaker models, actually, we do have an abstraction for, and we can actually register SageMaker with our system. And, there's a couple different ways that can be approached. Once again, if the data from these models are likely already report some statistics from things such as CloudWatch, et cetera. Those actually are captured by our system directly. So if it's something that SageMaker already naturally reports, that we can, those will be represented within our system. In addition to that, we also, because again, we take that black box approach to them, typically a SageMaker model would store that kind of data like training data, et cetera, and sample data in S3, and our system can natively read those results right out of the AWS S3 into our system. And so you can still use the standardized test, even though it's developed in SageMaker. Again, we don't have to execute in SageMaker. We can, but we don't have to. So, we can actually execute that locally and do those analyses locally. Now, likewise, if we wanted to, you can actually register a SageMaker based standardized test if that was something you wanted to do, and we can execute those because we have those job abstractions that work on that, as I mentioned, the SageMaker and et cetera. So we have the ability to do those as well. So it really is a very flexible system. And that's one of the reasons we treat these standardized tests and monitors and the dashboards we'll be looking at in the next session as registered versioned models themselves, because these are company assets making business decisions in the long run about your model of risk. And it's very important to version and review those within your own team. So, the real goal here out of all of this, and I apologize for the Jira breaking, but, the final step was to just view the ticket in Jira and see the document. But you can get the idea that, by automating these processes, allowing you to register tests that are specific to you, as well as already having a whole bunch of those out of the box, we can really, greatly leverage your existing model risk team or help to create a new one with less resources, because all of this stuff, you can invent them. So your model risk team can invent and provide the inspiration for the kind of the best of breed standardization of what models should go through. They're not tied to just our vision of it, although we have some out of the box and we have some great examples of how to do these things, but that team can innovate within their company and provide company-specific items and have those executed automatically, associated back in our system, and actually actioned upon when things don't work or do work or those kinds of things, and move them forward. So hopefully it really helps with bringing that model risk industrialization kind of vision to light. So with that, I think we're up against the time, so I want to conclude today's sessions.